You're watching.
You're watching.
You're watching.
You're watching.
You are watching
JoburgToday.
Peter Ndoro has a sit-down with the CEO of the South African Qualifications Authority, Nadia Starr, to have a conversation around Saqa, the NQF, and how the two merge together. This is For the Record.
Nadia Starr, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm so happy to be here.
So let's clear some things up. I mean, you know, our viewers have heard of NQF, Saqa, South African Qualification Authority, National Qualification Framework. What does it all mean, and how do these two work together?
The South African Qualifications Authority is a statutory entity. We're a public entity established by an Act of Parliament, and our core mandate is to develop the National Qualifications Framework. So the National Qualifications Framework, the NQF, is really essentially a democratic tool. It's a system for registering, classifying and recognizing qualifications. And importantly, it's a national tool so that, you know, we were able to recognize, categorize qualifications nationally, really no matter where you're learning or educated.
All right, you've, I guess, partly answered my next bit, is why the NQF is important, and what has it done? Because, 2008, I think, this is where the NQF Act came into being, isn't it? So take us through what it's been able to achieve over time and why it's important.
Sure. So the National Qualifications Framework was actually established in 1998. On the back of the NQF Act. We've recently changed in 2008 to the NQF Act. Originally it was the Saqa Act, apologies. But since 1998, the National Qualifications Framework has been a significant democratic tool. The reasons why it's important, I think firstly is it was the first unified education system that South Africa got. It was 2008 to the NQF Act. Originally it was the Saqa Act, apologies. But since 1998, the National Qualifications Framework has been a significant democratic tool. The reasons why it's important, I think firstly is it was the first unified education system that South Africa got. It was one of the first democratic policy instruments, and it brought together, as we know, a very disparate education system where classes and races were kept out systematically. So the NQF is the system that we have that allows everybody to really understand and access national quality education. But more than that, the NQF for me is a communication device. It allows hopefully people on the street, but also policymakers and other role players in education to understand how we relate to one another. So we're able, for instance, because the NQF is a theoretical ladder from level 1 to 10. At 4, you've got your senior certificate, your matric. At level 7, you've got your bachelor's. At level 10, you've got your PhDs. Because we have these logics, we're able to communicate quite easily. If you're coming out of school, it means you can go into university because we understand that the NQF allows us those levels and those progressions. And then I think, you know, the further reason why the NQF is so important, it also allows that communication or that translation internationally. We are one of, I think, 140 countries. About 80% of the world has qualifications frameworks. And so having a national qualifications framework allows our country and our qualifications to quite seamlessly communicate with foreign qualifications.
And how does it compare to how other countries do it?
Look, no instrument is perfect, right? And so there have been challenges, and I think internationally qualifications frameworks have been challenged. But we have I think in South Africa we've been very lucky to have robust engagement with really strong role players, and what we now have is a differentiated qualifications framework. So we have, 3 very different subsectors: schooling, skills, and the higher education subsectors, that the NQF is able to kind of allow seamless transitions in certain places and communication. It's still not a perfect instrument, and it's something I think that really requires more awareness and more advocacy, hence conversations like these. But it's certainly one that I think has come a long way and is almost 30 years old, having been one of the first generation NQFs. So certainly in terms of the global comparisons, we compare incredibly well, but all of our qualifications frameworks have a lot of work to do.
Education itself is evolving. Does that mean your work has to evolve as well?
Precisely. The qualifications framework is really the environment for education to play out in. And so we have to be cognizant of the demands of the labour market, the demands of the learner, and the changing demands really of the knowledge economy, absolutely.
All right. So how do you make these adjustments?
So, that's the trick, I think. We have a national qualifications framework, and that doesn't mean that all learning sits on the qualifications framework. You and I had to learn Teams, Zoom, Skype, and all of these things to continue working, in our environments. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we've got a qualification in Zoom. And so what the NQF should be doing is really keeping those parameters around full qualifications, but also allowing those full qualifications to be enriched and to influence the other stuff that we need to do to be full human beings. So, it's difficult sometimes to want the regulatory instrument to really catch up with everything that human life is doing, and sometimes it's not necessary. But absolutely, the sorts of things that we're doing and the changes in the way we work and learn are and will be influencing the NQF, absolutely.
I'm pretty sure that you're constantly making comparisons with global practice. Does that help you inform our education institutions about what they need to do to keep the standards up?
An important component of our work is research, and the research informing the policy and the advocacy that we do. So absolutely, I think it was last year or the year before, we looked at global inventories, what is happening in the world, and we aim then to disseminate the information. But we mustn't forget that we also sometimes are able to teach internationally. And there's been very many great things that South Africa has done, particularly in our NQF and in its objectives of access, redress, transformation, that the rest of the world are looking to and learning from.
Next 3, 4, 5 years, what's on your agenda?
Gosh, I've got about 10 years worth of initiatives on my agenda for the next 2 to 3 years. But really what SAQA needs to do, I think, internally is to start to stabilize after we've all come, post-COVID, post-pandemic. We are looking at different ways of working so that we can serve our public a little bit better. But quite significantly, what we need to be doing is creating more awareness and more information around the NQF, around the validity of qualifications, around young people and older people's choices in terms of the qualifications that they take and how that aligns to their progression. So many of our strategies will be looking at, how do we disseminate information and advocate to create awareness, and so that people are able to take the opportunities that the NQF, provides for us. But of course, we're also going to be doing quite a lot of research into new ways of learning, hybrid, online, micro-credentialing, etc. And so there will be a lot of research and consultation, both nationally and internationally, so that we're able to, I think, better position our framework for the future.
All right. You've worn a number of hats over time. One of them, I think, leading a CETA. And so now that you're almost, I wouldn't say on the other side, but I just wonder, looking from a CETA point of view and an NQF point of view, where are the gaps that need filling?
Look, I think with the SETAs are essentially implementing agencies. You know, they are supposed to be looking for the gaps and plugging them, whereas what Saqa is doing is providing for the entire system. And quite crucially, what Saqa and the NQF does is create a coordinated system. So our work is really about ensuring that the SETA's work fits into, you know, the comprehensive system, so that people who are coming from school are able to access a learnership, but equally graduate from that learnership and move into higher education if they so wish. And so, you know, the interfaces aren't always obvious between, for instance, SETAs and Saqa, but in the education space, the idea is that one individual should be able, you know, to work seamlessly through all of us and through all of these structures.
The NQF story, how does it fit into everyday life for employers?
I think, unfortunately, it doesn't fit in as well as it should, and that's why one of our biggest strategies at the moment is advocacy and information. Employers, I think, really tend to understand the NQF from a perspective of recruitment. You know, what qualification are you coming in? Is it an NQF 7? And what we would like to start seeing is a more owned space with employers. We certainly have seen positive strides with both universities, but also the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations, who have brought employers into their spaces of curriculum development. And in my previous life, you know, that was one of my specific functions, having the voice of the employer in the curriculum development process, so that the graduate at the end is in fact work ready.
Education system, changing curriculum takes time, whereas the real world is moving at lightning speed. How do we put all of this together?
One of the things that Saqa has been doing, and we continue to do, is work with, in fact, we're currently working with the Higher Education Reform Expert South Africa through a project by FENSA, which looks at the work integrated learning policy. And really what that is doing is saying, within the curricula, how are we creating opportunities for young people or people in education to be exposed to the workplace, so that they're able to get some level of, you know, what the employers really need. These are about building relationships and building systems around the students to enable them to get every facet of what they need really to enter the workplace. But as I say, it's an ongoing job, and it really requires you know, some effort from all role players.
It's been a long journey. 1998, Saqa Act, 2008, NQF Act. Is this the model, do you think, still, that works to do the work that you do? Or do you think it might need to be looked at again?
I think renewal and review is always important. And even if we don't aim to change, one should introspect, review, and have a look. So absolutely, we need to review, particularly because we don't know what the next 10 years might look like and might demand of us. And I think we'll be continually reviewing. But I do think that some of the fundamental principles that the NQF itself is built on, access, redress, mobility, progression, integration, those are not things that are going to go away.
Nadia Starr, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks so much indeed for unpacking this Saqa NQF story for us and why it's so important. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Peter.